Good morning, everyone. And I hope the organizers gives me the 40 minutes which I deserve because we are running 20 minutes late. But thank you, my co-panelists. And I think our life has been made easy by the presence and presentation of Mr. Ghosh. So I'll not get into those numbers which I wanted to talk about because I think he has already set the context. Even though numbers of his and mine differ, but that is the problem of data in India. All of us differ and we take our own numbers. But I'll go back and because I come from the urban background and everybody has talked about Bangalore. That is a headline, so that's the water headline today. And everybody is thinking about water. I come from the cities and the way the urbanization is happening. I was in Kerala, which is becoming 93% urban. Where will be the services come from? That's the challenge. Recently in my past Avatara, I looked at 100 smart cities and some capital cities, 126, and did a survey. Are our cities prepared to look at this challenge and address this challenge of water and water security? And to your surprise, out of 126, 59 cities have not initiated any action towards water assessment or water resource management. 64 cities have not initiated any action towards reuse and recycling of waste. And what we are right now going, while we are developing these concrete jungles, we are encroaching our water bodies, we are encroaching on our drainage channels, and our waters which are, water bodies which are remain, they are fed up with sewage and industrial effluents. So that's the challenge we have to do. I know that it's a big challenge, but water is, we can, my colleague was just now saying, we can survive without electricity, but we cannot survive without water. And I have a great panel today here, and I will not get into it, but I will just take three things. Recently, we had G20 in India, and one of the engagement group was Urban 20. And the three things that Urban 20 communique talked about on water was we need to mainstream sustainable water management practices. I think my colleagues from the private sector, and I was talking to them and I said, what you are doing does not get heard in the cities. So there is a huge communication problem. And I particularly personally feel that the language of climate is not the language of cities. Unless the language of climate becomes the language of cities, we will not be able to address this challenge. Second thing they talked about, we need to protect and revitalize water ecosystems. And they have a number of points which I'll not go through. And third was strengthen effective water governance. These were the three broad area. 105 cities across the world signed this communique, and which is a big, that it's not only in India, as Mr. Ghosh was saying, it is across the world. The challenge of water and wastewater is the same. And we have an SDG 6, which is our commitment. When I say our commitment, everybody has commitment that 2030 we will do this, sustainable development goals. We have seen what happened to Millennium Development Goals, and now we are just 7 years ahead of sustainable development goals. Whether we will be able to make, but I particularly feel the way things are in India, I think India is much better positioned. The policies are being designed, the way is to meet those challenges, then it is a credibility to this mission, because we will see the same leadership having 2030 answering to the people. So I particularly feel that's why it makes more credible of our commitments than anybody else's commitments. But I'll not talk much, as I said, but I'll go directly to the panelists, because it's the private sector who has to work with the cities. And right now I don't see that interaction and that collaboration, that language, and how do they collaborate and work together is the challenge which we all have to do. So I'll go straight with my first panelist, Prarthana, and not because she's sitting third to me in the photograph and all, but we are celebrating International Women's Day, and this is a week, and I think that's why she is going to be empowered society which we want, and she should have a first voice. So Prarthana, considering the urgency of action of water security, which we all are looking at, what are the most impactful steps businesses and cities need to take to advance collaboration for sustainable water management. Over to you.
Thank you, Hitesh. Thank you for the nice comments, and thank you to the Global Sustainability Alliance for inviting me to talk about my views. I've been very lucky to be in different spaces, and in the last couple of years work very closely with the private sector. So I think I'll address the question from a macro perspective, because having had I was fortunate to work with global private sector companies which have very well informed sustainability teams. So the perspective there is much more, it has a stronger knowledge base. So if you look at 2021 data from the Carbon Disclosure Project, the estimation of risks for water has been done at $301 billion. That is the water risks that were estimated by about 15,000 odd companies globally. But what is very interesting to understand is that the cost of inaction is 5 times higher, because the cost of addressing those risks was estimated at 50 billion USD, which means that there are ways in which you can look at mitigation. But again, there's a catch there, because we're talking about 15,000 large companies world over. When you come down, how many companies in countries like India estimate the water risks that are associated with scarcity of water or inefficiency of water? I think that is the first area that we need to address. Look at generating data from more than these larger companies that are there in the global space, and how does one actually come to an actual figure in terms of water risk? So that is my first point. The second point is there is a lot of sectoral differences. Different companies need different amount of water, and there is also a geographical issue associated. I mean, this is where probably the cities come in, the urban comes in terms of where the company is. Where is it in terms of the geographical region, especially in terms of water stress? Is it in a water stress region? Is it in an area, in a coastal area where water can be used differently? So I think we are not doing enough of that. How does one match the private sector in terms of a location, and in terms of the sector, in terms of the water use, and how does one map it with the kind of area that is associated with? The third issue is the actual estimation of water in an industry. Now, I was reading that for the food and beverages industry, almost 25,000 liters of water is required for making and supplying food to a family of 4. Now, this is 25,000 liters for a family of 4. But what we've not looked at is that it is not just the production of the food. The water in a food industry is used for CIP, for cleaning. It is used for storage of the food. Now, unless we do a breakup of all these areas, it would be very difficult for us to estimate where we need the efficiency, where do we need to reduce the usage. So I think the going micro into where the water is being used and how it is being used will actually also help us identify solutions. And I think, there would be wonderful case studies. I think some of my panelists are going to touch upon it. But I think we need more detailed analysis in terms of our water audits. We work a lot on, with companies, especially companies which need hand-holding on water audits. One of the things that is a big challenge is they don't know how to do it. So how does one facilitate that process? And how does one look at the right technology to actually look at whether it's blue water, green water, gray water, how is it being used, where is it being used? My final point is on hand-holding and capacity building, because I think the larger India goes beyond the top companies. It is about smaller companies. It is about companies which do not, at the moment, put sustainability very high on the agenda. With the BRSR reporting coming into the space, there is a huge opportunity for us to look at engaging with some of these companies. And as a company, we are working with about 35 odd unlisted, lower listed companies to work on the BRSR reporting. And we've done assessments in terms of the question. There is a question in the BRSR on water usage and water discharge. What we've done is, even if we look at 100 odd plants that we have surveyed, there is a lot of information on water usage, but the complexity is on the water discharge. And how does one estimate the water discharge? Most of these companies don't have that data. So facilitating this process in terms of companies which can come in the entire knowledge sharing of building the base in terms of how to gather this data, I think that is going to be key if we have to address these solutions in terms of water efficiency and water scarcity. Stop there.
Thank you, Prarthana. I think you really point out evidence-based strategies as well as hand-holding and capacity building as two key takeaways of if I take it. But moving on, we are living in cities. The companies also stay in the cities. They are not two different geography. If cities suffer, the organizations suffer. And, while I was listening to Prarthana, the only thing which was coming to me was a Kabir ka doha, kal kare so aaj kare so ab. So we are in that stage because, anytime the disaster is just ticking away. So Aneesh, as we talked about, while we are talking about built environment, all these buildings, when they design, they have water conscious designs, but they never get fructified once they are implemented. And I have a very high-packed questions for you, 3 in 1, but you have still 5 minutes. What is the primary cause of deviation? That's number 1. Second is, do we really require more regulatory frameworks or more incentives? What will work and what will not work? Too much of incentives also has a problem, and too much of regulation also have a problem. And like ECBC, do we need to go back to a built environment also on a monitoring or audits or something like that, particularly for water? I leave it to you now to really respond and how you want to articulate that. Over to you.
Thank you, Hitesh. And of course, thank you everybody for being here for this very, very important subject. And of course, to Times Now for hosting this. So yeah, 3 very important questions. And I'll just tell you a bit of a background about where I come from to put context to this. So I'm with CBRE, and we manage, while we do a lot of other work, but the business I run is basically we're managing the buildings for a lot of developers, a lot of corporates. So we have data and we have insights for more than 250 buildings, 450 million square feet of space that we manage. And that is how I think the insights that we have is generally that, yes, because we are mostly in tier 1 cities, maybe tier 2, the developers that we work with also are grade A developers mostly. So when they build to, even the consultants who give them the advice, they will go in for pre-certification, LEED certification, IGBC, CREA, whatever they take. And water efficiency is built in. However, when the building becomes operational, then it's not only just the developer, there are tenants in the building. Of course, if you're your own building, then you can manage it better. So there are a lot of factors which go in moving the building away from its design. So NBC says, okay, 45 liters of water per day in commercial buildings. But typically, it is much more than that. There could be various reasons. You design a building for 2,000 people. Because the nature of the work, it's actually having 2,500 people. You don't have the right, low, I would say, fixtures which have low usage. So there are various factors which go in. But right now, what's the problem I see is that there is the cost of water is so low, right? So for a developer, a lot of times they don't even charge it into their maintenance things. It's just one head which says, okay, these are the utility charges. Electricity, of course, is very high, but water is a small percentage of that. So it is just, it's just not seen as a big ticket item. So the focus is not there. Thankfully, things are changing now. Thanks to awareness, thanks to customers also. Say, for example, like say Flipkart wants to move into a building. they'll first ask the developer, what is your water per capita consumption? What is your energy consumption? So because of these, the developers are now going for certifications. You have your LEED certification, IGBC has their own net zero certifications. So that is now bringing the focus back onto being more efficient in everything, in all the whatever energy uses they have, whatever water uses they have. So I think to answer the first question, why do they deviate? The primary reason is that the incentive to stay true is less right now. It doesn't really pinch the pocket. And the customers are also not so demanding earlier. Now that is changing. So I think that deviation is getting reduced. But again, this is only in the big, large developers who are there or large occupiers. Smaller developers or standalone buildings also, that's not a focus for them as of now. Like you mentioned, smaller companies are not, that is not a focus for them. They just want to see that they're able to get their money back and run their building operations. The second thing you mentioned about was on the regulatory. Now that's a very, very touchy subject. We have a person from the industry here as well. So regulations are generally not liked by the industry. But I think at some point in time, regulations are needed. It's a mix, I think, between regulations and incentives. I think one of the classic examples is of incentives is the Bureau of Energy Efficiency star leveling system, if you remember. Nowadays, when you go and buy an air conditioner or whatever, one of those large appliances, there's a rating system, and most people will want to go in for the best if they can afford it, or whatever best they can afford. That's kind of brought in that behavior change. It was not forced onto the manufacturers. It was a kind of a voluntary scheme, I believe so. But that's what's changed the behavior. So that, I think, brought in a lot of changes in the behavior of the people, the customers, the manufacturers. Similarly, something of that sort should be there. I think incentives work better, is my personal feeling, to change behaviors. But at certain, because of the precarious nature of water, we have examples of cities, but all across the globe, water is a challenge. So I think there is a need for some amount of mandates or regulations from the government side, which right now is just, there's an NVC code. So if you follow it, great. If you don't follow it also, nobody's really questioning you on that. But I think somewhere, and this is the whole building, it's just not just the use of the water for potable water. You're using water in buildings for a lot of other things. So that, I think, will help. And I think this ties in with the last question that you also had about that ECBC. Water audits, for example, I think a very nice point that Prarthana mentioned. Nobody really does it so effectively. Now with ESG reporting coming in, and I would say there's more awareness, both from the end users as well as the occupiers. So it's happening now. There just needs to be more awareness about it. And water conservation code, I think, could help in. It's already there, I think, in most, when you go in for a LEED certification or a green certification, it's already built in. But a code from a government body, I think will bring in more validity to it. And that may be the need of the hour, because the situation is bad. So I think that's what I would like to put across.
Thank you, Aneesh. Moving on, we have talked about the big pictures, but ultimately it is the application of these things. How do you apply these tools at the local level, or at the, where it really starts making a difference. Particularly coming from urban local bodies, again, as I come back to that, what I have realized, and listening from them, we know what to do. We also know why we need to do it. We also, more or less, with the experts like who are doing, we know how it has to be done. I think the missing point, which I particularly, why Bangalore is facing a problem, or any other city and capacity, is we are not even talking about who is going to do it. And that who is missing in this whole journey, who is going to really open the tap and that the water will start flowing. That guy, that his skills, his mentality, how does he look at these tools which are available with the private sector and start applying at the city level and the city scale? I think that's the challenge which we all have. But moving to Rajeev, we have been talking outside, and you have been doing a lot of strategies for managing and saving water. And I think you are going to launch something too, which I may not say right now because it's your way with it. But I while you are talking about what Hindware is trying to do to save water, if you can also talk about what critical mindset shift is required so that business and cities start talking about the same language, as well as they start prioritizing water sustainability. Over to you.
Thanks, Hitesh. Everybody talked about the global water situation. I just want to share some insights about the water situation in India in particular. So India is one of the most water-stressed countries in the world, and it is a home to 18% of the world population, but has only 4% of the world's water resources. So that puts additional stress on India as a country in terms of water sustainability practices, which we need to adopt. If you look at the cities and towns of India, only about 13.5% of wastewater is treated, which means that much of the remaining water goes untreated into the lakes and rivers, further putting a lot of stress on the fresh water availability. Now, this impending challenge places a significant burden on the businesses which rely heavily on water, and Hindware is one of them. So at Hindware, our approach to the water conservation is a two-pronged approach. One is the products, second is the processes. Okay, on the product side, we're looking at developing products which save water. So we have launched a lot of water-saving products like the half-flush, full-flush water closets, waterless urinals, and a lot of other products. And soon we are about to launch Aqua Pro series of faucets which saves 98% water. Now, everybody is talking about Bangalore. It is a very, very pertinent thing which is coming up today and it is fast approaching us as a time bomb if we don't act on it. So, if you look at the situation we have in Bangalore, in fact, I was reading an article yesterday in Times of India. It says, in 1973, about 70% of Bangalore was forested, and today it is less than 10%. Rest all is kind of concretized. So, it is very, very pertinent that we look at the change in attitude, because it is the same planet we are living in, and if we do not conserve it, we'll not have anything left for tomorrow, for the generations to come. Now, in line with this, we are launching products like the Aqua Pro range, which saves 98% water. So we are now looking at creating a connection with the public at large and with the institutionals as well, so that we can send this communication across, so we can develop the product, but the consumption of those products in the market depends on the public-private participation and also the participation from the entire society around us. Apart from this, if you look at the processes side, we firmly believe that 3 R's is the thing to do, and rather a fourth element to that R, repurpose, has also been added now. So we put a lot of focus on making sure that whatever processes we design, they focus on reducing. If we cannot reduce, we try to reuse, and if we cannot reuse, we try to recycle the water back into our processes. So we have created a self-sustaining stream of resources, particularly for water in our processes, so that whatever we used, we reuse it back into the system by making it fit for use. Also, we are looking at improving the product efficiencies, improving the product yield, so that the wastage we generate in the process, which uses additional amount of water, we can avoid. So there's a lot of focus on measuring the specific water consumption per unit as a metric, which one of my panelists, or rather both of my panelists, have stressed upon. We're talking of water audits. So water audits can only help us only if we start monitoring the specific water consumption per unit of what we produce in the industries, so that I firmly believe that unless and until we monitor, we cannot improve. So, and to monitor, we need to create metrics which we can monitor, which can be in front of us as a dashboard, which can lead us to where we want to be. So that's all.
Thank you, Rajeev. I think you really talked about product, and processes. And I think that's where, and the city scale, if we have to really look at it, the both products and processes has to be changed and improved upon. Because I always also believe कि अगर बाहुबली बनानी है तो सारे प्रोसेसेस को देखना पड़ेगा, तभी बाहुबली सक्सेस होती है, नहीं तो बाहुबली सक्सेस नहीं होती है. But you also talk about 4R approach. I think that's a new idea. And also third thing, you did talk about whatever can be monitored can be measured. So I think these 3 points I take it from you. I now move to Nishant. Gupta had sustained Flipkart, and why I said his introduction here, because when I was told that Flipkart person is going to speak, and I say, Flipkart ko water mein kya karna hai? Why is here? But when I talked to him outside, I realized how much they are doing. So one more thing, he's a Bangalore-based company. So that's why I want him to particularly talk about what Flipkart is, how it's driving its operation in water and wastewater, as well as how you're managing it. And as company in Bangalore-based, how do you think aligning with your tools, templates, and technologies which cities can benefit? Over to you, Nishant.
So thanks a lot, Hitesh, for having me here. And taking on what you said, right? E-commerce is not a very heavy water-intensive industry, but e-commerce also happens to be an industry which operates at a very high scale. So you have tens of thousands of employees, you have supply chain which is distributed across to the last pin code possible in the country. You have thousands of units spread across the country which help in the distribution and delivery of products. So therefore, the scale of the operations itself mandates us to be a lot more responsible, even though we may not be a water-intensive industry, right? Also, I'll just take cues from everyone who has spoken before me, so it becomes my job relatively easier because the context is set. One is that, yes, financially there may or may not be a lot of incentives to work on water because cost of water is relatively low or next to nothing in most of the places. And therefore, how do you then generate an environment in a large organization where employees feel that they need to work towards a cause which is not core to their work, right? And that's where I think, based out of Bangalore, it comes very naturally because water problem has been getting highlighted in recent times. But in general, when you work on that, we created a lot of awareness in the organization about sustainability-related initiatives. And we got a lot of excitement from the employees themselves to come together and say that, no, we want to work on this problem. We want to contribute in whatever way we can. And then we set out our process, which was just mentioned earlier, to say that if you can't even measure, you don't have monitoring systems in the supply chain to figure out how much water are you consuming, how much water are you wasting, then what would you even do about it, right? So we went on that process to start measuring the water consumption. We installed a lot of water meters across the supply chain. And then we started deploying what we say as the various interventions. So for example, in one of the largest warehouses in the country, Flipkart warehouse in Haringata in West Bengal, it's 110 acre, it's built on 110 acre plot of land. So you can imagine the size and the magnitude of it. But when we were designing the building itself, we were very sure that we want to make it self-sustainable. So all the water requirements, none of the water waste is seeping out. We are recycling every bit that we are wasting. We have a 8,000 cubic meter big water harvesting structure planned that, and wherever the facilities allow, wherever the infrastructure allows, we want to replicate it across our supply chain, right? Interestingly, you also mentioned tap kholega kaun. In fact, the conversation, what we are doing internally is the reverse, that tap ko thoda sa band karna chahiye, right? And what we realized was that just by improving the fixtures across the offices, across the supply chain, when you improve the when you deploy the water efficient fixtures, you can actually reduce your consumption itself, right? Second thing we did was that we did analysis on the water purification techniques that were being deployed. In some of the pockets, you did not need RO at all, which was wasting a lot of water. So as soon as you make more efficiency improvements in the water purification itself, 25 to 30% improvement happens in that. So you are reducing your consumption itself. So you reduce the consumption, you become more efficient in your consumption, then you recycle and retreat the water that is getting wasted. What we are doing with that water is that, of course, some part of it, the treated water comes back into the washrooms in flushes, etc. Then a lot of the water that is still left from that is being used for landscaping efforts, because otherwise these are small things which often get ignored because you don't necessarily feel that will make a difference, but at a company at scale, these things start mattering, because otherwise you were consuming water for landscaping, you were consuming water for flushes in the toilets, and if that water can be replaced by the treated water, you're reducing your fresh water consumption, which can be deployed for other people, which can be deployed for portable purposes as well, right? So these are the kind of activities that we have been doing and we are learning. The way we operate is that we do pilots in a few facilities, get the validation that we need, and then roll it out across our supply chain. Other element, and I know the time's up, but other element where we are also looking at our future journey is also to say that this is what we are doing in our operations, right? But can we educate our consumers towards going for more sustainable choices? Because that's where millions and hundreds of millions of consumers who shop on Flipkart, if we can provide them enough information about the products that they're purchasing, and if they can make purchases which are better for the environment, that is the way forward. So we have an initiative called Flipkart Green, where we highlight the products which are environmentally more sustainable, and they have valid certifications to prove that. Right, and then we communicate those to the consumers to say that this is certified in this aspect. If you're looking for this is the right product to purchase. So that's how I think, even if we are not a water intensive industry, we do feel that we can create a lasting impact.
Great. Thank you, Nishant. And I think for me, I know that time is up and I'll close, but what I heard from you, and I was just remembering a shloka from, I don't remember it totally, but the line from Bhagavad Gita which says, if you have a uniformity in your mind, then uniformity comes in your speech, and then that speech turns into action. And I think that's where all three of you really talked about. It's not a question of what we think or strategy, it's the action which really matter, and the people can, one action can take a lot of domino effect and can become a city scale. But again, closing here, and I know that it cannot be one-way street. You people will have a lot of questions to the panelists, but looking at time, I have to close it here. Thank you all my panelists for joining me. I think it was a great discussion. I think you all can have questions outside meeting them one-to-one, but it was a great, but I still feel, and I take away, all what you are doing has to be communicated to the authority or to the person who manages city. Unless we start linking all your efforts to efforts of cities and collaborate, and I think earlier, it cannot be only government can do, it has to come from the convergence, through collaboration and through cooperation of different stakeholders together. And I think that's where we need to do, and that need to break the barrier of that communication between the government and the private sector, so that both can learn from each other. So thank you very much. Thank you.